It started at 2:40 in the morning, in a cold, humming server room with nothing but coffee and instinct keeping me awake. What I didn't know was, by sunrise, someone would make a quiet decision that would change the course of my life. 12 screens glowed in front of me, showing everything from firewall activity to live data traffic across our financial platforms. At first, everything looked fine, but then I noticed it, small, repeated signals hitting our payment verification system, not random noise. Timed, controlled, like someone gently knocking on a locked door again and again, testing the handle. I checked the firewall logs, no alerts, nothing had been flagged. That wasn't good. It meant whoever was behind this knew how to sneak under the radar, just below the thresholds that trigger warnings. I isolated the traffic and redirected it into a sandbox, a secured digital space where I could analyze without risking contamination. The source appeared to be internal, which made no sense. I traced it further. The IP address pointed to a machine labeled ARC01DBX, an internal data server that was supposed to have been permanently shut down after our last infrastructure migration. I remember signing off on its decommissioning myself, and yet, there it was. Online, active, routing traffic through a backdoor channel that shouldn't even exist anymore. My heart rate spiked. This wasn't just a breach. This was someone waking up an old system from inside the network. Someone with admin-level access and deep knowledge of our architecture. I could have triggered a full lockdown, slammed the panic button, but that would alert everyone from junior engineers to the boardroom. If I was wrong, I'd be blamed for halting millions of dollars in live transactions. So I made the call. I stayed silent. My fingers moved fast, isolating ports, tagging malicious strings, filtering out injected code. I pulled in real-time metrics, scanning for any trace of lateral movement. The more I dug, the more certain I became. This wasn't an external hack. It was an inside job. The server had been reactivated manually. There were no automation flags, no reboot logs, no scheduled tasks, just a sudden pulse, like it had been brought back from the dead. And I was the only one in the building who knew. By 2:54. I had neutralized the immediate threat. But the bigger problem remained. Someone inside the company had turned on a machine we buried months ago, and they had done it without leaving a trace. I didn't sleep. After shutting down the reactivated server's access routes, I stayed in the monitoring bay, staring at the residual traffic like it might explain itself. There was something disturbingly familiar about the attack signature, how it slipped through the default threat detection, how it fragmented data requests just enough to stay invisible to automated filters. I'd seen this style before, not in the wild, not in external attacks. It was internal, experimental. I just couldn't place it, until I remembered a test project from last year. Back when our team was still under old leadership, I dug into the internal code archive. It took me 10 minutes to track down a sandboxed exploit used in a now-defunct simulation exercise. The similarities were striking: packet delay patterns, credential spoofing, even the segmentation logic. The old file was titled Slipstream Alpha, Rev B. And the author? Jonas Tellman. I froze. Jonas had been one of our senior penetration analysts. Sharp, erratic, unpredictable. He'd submitted the Slipstream model in a pitch to automate internal vulnerability testing. The approach was aggressive, almost reckless, but brilliant in the wrong hands. It was ultimately rejected, too unstable, too invasive, too political. He didn't take it well. Weeks later, after a confrontation with the department head, he was reassigned to a non-operational role. And then, just like that, he vanished. No farewell email, no LinkedIn update, no rumor mill chatter, just gone. But now his code had resurfaced, weaponized, and someone had tailored it to blend with our new network structure, which didn't exist when Jonas was still around. That meant someone had re-engineered his blueprint, someone with current architecture knowledge. I accessed internal directory logs out of pure instinct, The name wouldn't be there. I was sure of it. But then, it was Jonas Tellman, external security consultant. Assigned, Office of the CTO. Date, 3 weeks ago. Of course, Alex. The CTO had only been in charge for a month, but he was already shaking things up, replacing legacy protocols, reassigning access rights, building a leaner, modernized stack. As he called it, and now, apparently, bringing back old ghosts in new suits. Jonas wasn't just back, he was embedded. The idea made my stomach twist, but not from surprise, from recognition. It all fit too easily. The server wasn't accidentally reactivated. The code wasn't coincidental. The exploit wasn't blind. It was all designed, controlled, and I had walked straight into it, cleaning up their mess while staying conveniently off the record. I leaned back in my chair, cold air biting through the sleeves of my blazer. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. But I didn't type. There was nothing else to search. The answers were sitting right there, staring back at me through a dimly lit monitor. Jonas had written the weapon. Alex had hired him back. And I was the last person who wasn't supposed to find out. I didn't have time to process the Jonas twist. Knowing he was back, quietly tucked under Alex's wing, only confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't a breach. It was a test, and I was the test subject. The breach hadn't tripped any of our auto-detection protocols. That meant two possibilities. Either it was so sophisticated it bypassed our threat engines completely, or someone had disabled the failsafes. I checked. 3 of the 4 automated flags for eastbound packet flow had been muted. Not removed, just turned down. Like someone tweaking the volume to avoid waking the house. I stared at the screen. Our AI-driven defenses were still running, but hobbled. They weren't watching what mattered. They were distracted by noise, baited by decoys. The real attack had slipped through the blind spot, and the system hadn't even blinked. I didn't hesitate. Override protocol initiated. 1 command, 1 line of code, and just like that, I took the machine off autopilot. Our defensive stack was no longer being managed by algorithms. It was mine now. Every gate, every trigger, every sensor. If anything went wrong from this point on, it wouldn't be blamed on the system, it would fall on me. My palms were already sweating. The terminal flashed confirmation, manual mode engaged, and with it came silence, real. Weighted silence, no more predictive feedback. No alerts unless I programmed them. I was flying blind with full control. I ran a sweep. The moment the system transitioned, I caught something new, buried deep in the behavior logs of Node C7. A script had been inserted 6 weeks ago. The code was subtle, not malicious, not overt, but it had reshaped how that node reported activity. The language was elegant, too elegant. I knew that writing style, sharp, economical, recursive, Jonas. But what made my stomach drop was the note in the metadata. Request approved, A, B, Alex Brain. He hadn't just brought Jonas back. He had given him permission to modify our reporting stack. That was why our security protocols hadn't seen the breach. The sensors weren't looking where they should have been. They had been told not to. I looked up, slowly, eyes scanning the dark room. Still alone. I took a breath, wiped my hands on my sleeves, and got back to work. I needed to close the entry point without triggering suspicion. They couldn't know I was watching them back. My fingers moved faster now. I restructured firewall hierarchies, rerouted logging behavior, tagged suspicious outbound signals for silent monitoring if they wanted stealth. I'd show them real stealth, but as I worked, something shifted in me. I flashed back, 10 years earlier. First week on night rotation, a junior analyst, jittery from her 3rd energy drink, watching a strange spike in outbound traffic from a deprecated backup system. I'd called my manager in a panic. He told me I was overreacting and to let the AI figure it out. 2 hours later, the system crashed. I was the one who stayed to restore it, alone, cold, terrified. That night, I learned something the textbooks never taught. Systems don't save themselves. People do, and people like Alex. They count on the system hiding what they don't want seen. My back ached, but I kept going. There was no room for fear now, only precision. By the time the sun started hinting over the skyline, I had neutralized the rogue code, reinforced the key nodes, and created a shadow layer of system alerts, visible only to me. I didn't know who else was in on this. I didn't know how far it reached, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The system wasn't broken. It was blind. On purpose. By 3:03 in the morning, the breach was finally contained. I had shut down the rogue internal server, terminated the session tokens, revoked the compromised digital certificates, and re-verified all endpoint connections. The attack vector had been neutralized without touching a single external gateway. Not even our Tier 2 systems had registered a disruption. That was the point. Of course, it was designed to be invisible, but I saw it, and I stopped it. The system was safe. No data exfiltrated, no services interrupted, no clients affected. On paper, it was a perfect containment operation. And yet, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. I leaned back in my chair, 12 monitors still blinking a soft green glow across the cold room. My pulse had finally come down, but the silence left behind felt sterile, heavy. At 3:07, I opened a fresh incident report. Title: Unauthorized Internal Breach. Node: ARC01. DBX. Severity: Critical Status: Resolved. I documented everything: discovery time, intrusion pattern, IP trace, escalation path, and exact countermeasures applied. I even attached side-by-side code comparisons, the modified sensor script against the clean baseline from 6 weeks ago. I flagged Jonas's pattern fingerprints. I highlighted the metadata link to Alex Brain's approval. It was the most thorough technical write-up I'd submitted in over a year. At 3:21, I manually entered the recipients: Alex Brain, Leo Kwon, Head of Infrastructure, Internal Audit, and Carla Mendel, our CEO. I hit send. Then I waited. At 3:28, I checked the dashboard for signs of acknowledgement. No ticket activity, no internal ping. At 3:35, still nothing, not even an auto-reply, out of habit. I reopened the sent message to confirm it left my outbox. That's when I saw it. Beside Carla's name: delivery status, rerouted, security digest queue. What? I expanded the email header. The system had automatically filtered out her address, marking it as non-operational recipient for internal security traffic. My report had been rerouted to the Daily Digest, a compiled email batch reviewed at 7:30 in the morning, usually by someone in legal. I didn't authorize that. In fact, I'd submitted dozens of high-priority incidents in the past, with direct CEO visibility. No filter had ever touched them. But now, suddenly, the system decided Carla didn't need to see the biggest breach we'd ever faced? No, someone made that decision, and I was starting to see who. I minimized the report, fingers hovering over the keyboard. No one else had responded. No messages, no calls, just the quiet hum of the servers and the static in my head. At 3:43, Leah from Facilities stepped into the server bay, holding a clipboard, her overnight rounds. "You still in here?" she asked softly. "Just finished," I said, forcing composure. She glanced at the screen wall. "Saw bandwidth spikes around 240. Power drain in Sector C? Something happen?" I hesitated. "Nothing that made the news." She smiled faintly. "You always fix things before the rest of us even notice they're broken." I nodded. "Bad habit." She paused. "Claire, does anyone ever actually thank you for what you do?" I gave a half smile. "Only the machines." She chuckled and left. Her footsteps faded into the hallway. At 3:51, I powered down my station, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked toward the elevator. The building was dim and sterile, just how it always felt after midnight. But tonight, it felt colder, like something had been erased, and I wasn't sure if it was the breach or me. The elevator opened. I stepped inside. The reflection in the polished metal doors looked like me, but quieter, smaller, out of frame. I scanned my ID badge on instinct. Nothing beeped back. It wasn't deactivated, just slow. Or maybe I was just noticing it now, as the doors slid shut. I looked at the camera in the corner, just one red dot blinking steadily. It wasn't watching me. It was recording my exit, clean, silent, as if I'd never been there at all, by 6:15 in the morning. The building was no longer mine alone. I stepped back into the Arcavia headquarters, still dressed in last night's clothes, hair pulled into a hasty tie, my eyes shadowed from too much screen time. The sun had begun to crawl across the edge of the skyline, casting long slivers of light through the glass-paneled lobby. Morning had arrived, but something about it felt wrong. The front desk attendant, Jenna, didn't greet me like she usually did. No nod. No, "Hey, Claire." She just looked down at her screen, tapping distractedly. I tried not to take it personally. Inside the elevator, two software engineers, Dylan and Mira, stepped in behind me. They used to ask me about system load balancing or throw quick jokes about overnight code pushes. This time, they stood stiffly silent. Mira glanced at me, then quickly away. Dylan tapped his badge and faced forward. No small talk, no eye contact. By 6:22, I reached the 4th floor, the security and infrastructure level. The lights overhead were already fully powered, humming bright white across the rows of cubicles and sleek conference rooms. I walked past the espresso bar. No one there. Past Leo's desk. Empty. Then I saw Leah. She was coming out of the HR suite, tablet in hand. Leah Jameson, our head of people operations, wasn't just a colleague. We'd worked side by side for 6 years, even survived 2 layoffs together. She was the one who convinced me to stay when I almost left for a startup offer last spring. She used to send memes on Sundays and leave a peppermint tea at my desk every Friday, like clockwork. Her eyes met mine for a second. Then she looked down and walked past without a word. Not even a nod. A cold drop slid down my spine. That wasn't Leah being busy. That was Leah avoiding something. I stood still for a moment, trying to make sense of the room around me. Background chatter hummed, but I couldn't make out a single complete sentence. People were whispering, not to me, but about me. I could feel it. I tapped my phone and opened Slack. Maybe there'd been an announcement, some policy change, a restructuring, anything to explain the shift in energy. I searched for the channel, core security, nothing came up. That couldn't be right. I scrolled through my sidebar, infra, DevOps, compliance, all still there, but the security channel was missing. I switched to desktop view and manually entered the phrase, "Join core security." The system responded, "Channel does not exist, or you do not have permission to view it." Error, "Channel does not exist, or you do not have permission." My heart stopped for a beat. I pulled up Slack's access logs and filtered by group permissions. It was buried 3 layers deep. But the data was clear. I had been removed from the core security workspace 48 hours ago, at 2:26 in the afternoon, 2 days before the breach. No notification, no request, no warning, just gone. I stared at the screen. My fingertips twitched. "Claire?" I turned. It was Marcus, one of the newer cybersecurity analysts. Friendly, bright, maybe too honest for this floor. He looked uneasy, holding a coffee in one hand and a laptop under his arm. I saw the internal logs," he said carefully. "That was some fast work last night." I nodded. "Thanks." He glanced around, then leaned in slightly. "They told us to keep quiet." I narrowed my eyes. Who did? He hesitated. Alex's office. He shifted his weight. Claire, I'm not supposed to say this, but they scrubbed the breach log from the team board, said it was a false alarm, and got folded into the weekly diagnostics. I clenched my jaw. I thought you should know, he added quickly, then walked away before I could reply. I stood there, pulse rising, thoughts racing. The report I sent? The silence? The odd looks? It wasn't me being paranoid. It was coordinated exclusion. Someone wanted me out of the loop, not just ignored, erased. I sat down at my desk, but the seat felt foreign. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then moved without thinking. I opened the old backup dashboard, the one no one used since Alex forced the migration to the new system. My access was still active there, and that meant one thing. I still had eyes in places they forgot to shut down. At 8:57 in the morning, my company badge vibrated with a calendar notification. Meeting, Alex Brain, location, executive level, 19th floor. The meeting was set for 9:00 in the morning. Exactly. There was no subject line, no assistant CC'd, just me and a meeting I hadn't asked for. I stood in front of the elevator, frozen for a breath too long, then stepped inside. The ride up felt slower than usual, too smooth, too silent. Every floor we passed hummed with life. But the 19th? That was where noise went to die. Executive quiet. When the doors slid open, Alex's assistant, Valeria, sat at the reception desk. Usually, she gave a warm nod or asked if I wanted coffee. Today, she barely looked up. He's ready for you. I knocked once. No answer. I pushed the door open. Alex Brain was standing by the window, back turned, arms folded behind him. The skyline stretched out in front of him, like some corporate empire he believed he owned. He didn't look up. Claire? He said, voice low and diplomatic. Have a seat. I didn't. He turned slowly and walked to his desk. A tan envelope sat in the center, like it had been waiting. He tapped it once with 2 fingers. We're restructuring, he said, realigning security functions to better match our future objectives. My pulse rose, slow but heavy. What does that mean exactly? I asked. It means we're moving to an external model, third-party expertise, more flexible, less overhead. He gestured toward the envelope. You'll find your exit package inside. We're offering a generous transition. I blinked. You're firing me. He smiled politely. Let's call it a realignment. No one realigns someone overnight without warning, not after they just stopped a major breach. His face didn't twitch, which was quickly resolved and overblown, according to the latest review. It didn't qualify as a reportable event. I stepped forward, heat rising behind my eyes. You buried my report. I routed it appropriately. You removed me from the core security channel. I streamlined the chain of communication. You brought Jonas back. That stopped him. For a second, he tilted his head. Claire, let's not make this emotional. I stared at him. Jonas was removed for cause. He was unstable. He proposed exploits, then tried to justify them as tests. Now you bring him back and... Alex slid a folder across the table. Jonas Tech is the firm we're partnering with. They've built an agile penetration team, modern protocols, real-time response structure. They're already under contract as of yesterday afternoon. I opened the folder. Jonas Tech LLC vendor agreement. Approved, signed just yesterday at 3:17 in the afternoon. I felt my stomach turn. You signed this while I was still neutralizing the breach he helped design. Alex didn't flinch. You've done valuable work, Claire. But systems evolve. We need vendors who innovate faster, leaner, not internal friction. I picked up the envelope. It felt light. Final. Is this why no one's talking to me? I asked quietly. Why Leah won't look me in the eye. Why the breach log disappeared. He offered a placid smile. I can't speak for others. I gave 7 years to this company. And we appreciate it. No, I snapped, voice rising. You don't. You used me to fix what your vendor broke. Then you pushed me out so no one would ask why you hired him in the first place. Alex stepped back behind his desk. You're taking this too personally. I laughed once, hollow. You made it personal the second you decided silence was more valuable than the truth. He didn't answer. I turned to leave. My fingers tightened around the envelope. At the door, I paused. One last question, I said. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Or did you just think I'd leave quietly? He said nothing. I walked out. The elevator ride down was slower this time. I could feel the weight of the envelope in my hand, but it was nothing compared to the pressure building in my chest. Rage, betrayal, disbelief, but not despair, never despair, not when I still had access to the one system they forgot to revoke. I didn't go anywhere after I left the tower. No rooftop bar, no silent park bench, no long drive to clear my head. I went home. It was 10:02 in the morning when I stepped into my apartment. Blinds still closed. Laptop still open where I'd left it the night before. The room smelled like burnt coffee and overheating plastic. There was a stillness to it that matched how I felt inside. Hollow, but sharp-edged. I dropped the envelope on the kitchen counter without opening it. I didn't need to see the number. I already knew what it was worth. A signature and silence. I sat down at my workstation, turned on the second monitor, and opened the air-gapped backup terminal. It wasn't connected to the cloud. It wasn't on Arcavia's network. It was mine. The last thing they hadn't touched. My fingers moved slowly, deliberately, typing command after command, restoring the diagnostic logs from the breach window, 2:01 to 3:15 in the morning. What I found shouldn't have surprised me, but it still hurt. Exactly 21 minutes before the breach began. A security alert suppression had been triggered manually. Node, Zurich Gateway. Action, disable behavioral alerts. Type A packets. Time, 1:39 in the morning. Accessed via user profile AB.R01. The system handle assigned to Alex Brain. I stared at the string for a long time. Alex Brain. He didn't just bury the aftermath. He prepped the breach. He shut off the sensors, then waited for the chaos. And when I saved it all before it exploded, he made sure I'd disappear along with the problem. I clenched my jaw. Then exhaled slowly. Not rage, not yet. I needed proof, not for them, for me. I opened a hidden directory inside the backup system, a decrypted archive I'd created a year ago when I started noticing subtle anomalies in team permissions and audit logs. It was a habit I had formed long before Alex arrived, back when trust was earned through redundancy. Within the archive was a nested folder labeled Personnel Deep. It took a moment to unpack. Inside was a PDF document with no metadata, just a flat file titled Security Restructure Proposal, V3.2, Final. The first 3 pages were high-level strategy points, budget savings, outsourcing benefits, a generic case for externalizing security roles. Page 4 started listing names. I scrolled slowly. Each name had a corresponding status. Retain, reassign, phase out. My name was listed first. Claire Kendrick. Phase out. Q2. Reason. Resistance to integration. Legacy mindset. Poor adaptability to vendor-based architecture. I read it again. Then again. Below mine were 6 others. 3 engineers, 2 analysts, 1 senior compliance officer, all marked for transition or exit. I knew these people. I'd mentored 2 of them, had lunch with another just last week. They had no idea. This wasn't about efficiency. It was a purge. I sat back in my chair, hand resting against my mouth. My chest tightened. Not from anger, but from grief. Grief for a version of the company I used to believe in. One where merit meant longevity, where loyalty didn't come with an expiration date. I picked up my phone and hovered over a text thread with Leo, but I didn't send anything. He was probably in a meeting, or worse, already in line. I flipped open my personal notebook, black leather, torn at the corner, and began writing. 10:18 in the morning. Breach initiated by internal override. Sensor suppression confirmed. Sensor suppression confirmed. Decision to terminate made prior to event. Control was never lost. It was handed over. I paused, then underlined the last sentence twice. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled a small hard drive from my desk drawer, a sealed black unit with no labels. It wasn't just backup. It was what I called the fail-safe, a full copy of Arcavia's infrastructure schema, and a legacy admin credential chain that hadn't been purged when Alex's team switched the system last quarter, because no one thought to look back far enough, because no one thought I would still be here. I connected the drive. The lights blinked blue. Everything I needed to understand the full shape of what they were doing, and undo it if I chose to, was here. I didn't know what the next move was yet, but I knew this. They had underestimated me. They thought breaking my heart would end me, but all it did was open my eyes. It was 9:02 in the evening by the time I rechecked the watchdog file. I sat by the window with the blinds halfway drawn. The orange city haze bleeding across my carpet. The air inside was still, broken only by the faint hum of my backup system's fans and the low whistle of wind between glass panels. I wasn't angry anymore. That part had burned off hours ago. Now, I was just ready. I opened the watchdog script. The code was clean, sparse, silent. It didn't shout. It waited. Built 2 years ago, back when internal threats were still rumors, and senior security engineers still had the freedom to make decisions without asking for permission. The protocol was officially called a continuity safeguard, an internal failsafe meant to ensure system integrity during account loss or unexpected role termination. But we all called it what it was: a watchdog. It monitored heartbeat signals tied to credential clusters. If a critical account was revoked outside of standard deactivation windows, the watchdog would trigger a tiered protocol chain. Tier 1. Isolate all active command modules. Tier 2. Disable financial data streaming. Tier 3. Initiate full lock containment and log archival. And below Tier 3, buried so deep most never saw it, was Tier 4. The part only I knew about. The code that sent a ping to a secondary server located halfway across the globe. A machine outside Arcavia's ecosystem, something I called Echo Root. It lived on a server stack in rural Estonia, hosted through a shadow node built years ago with help from an old colleague, Mara Lin, a former encryption specialist turned white hat consultant. Mara had once said to me over noodles in Singapore, "If you ever build a system to protect something big, make sure the lock isn't inside the vault." Echo Root wasn't just a backup, it was an archive, a memory. It held a snapshot of the entire Arcavia system as it existed before the vendor integration push. It contained permission trees, admin overrides, and the full user access log from before Alex Brain ever signed a single document. And if the watchdog fired, Echo Root would wake up. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the lines of code. The script hadn't changed. It didn't need to. It was built to be quiet, unassuming. It didn't ask questions. It only listened for one thing: whether Claire Kendrick's access was stripped without protocol. That's all. And now, I just had to wait. I let my fingers rest on the keyboard, then opened an old email chain, one from 6 months ago. It was a brief exchange between me and Mara. After she'd moved her team to a hybrid infrastructure base in Tallinn, her last message still sat unread in my inbox. "Claire, if you ever need to disappear, ping twice and let the code talk. We built it for this. You're not crazy for preparing, just rare. I hadn't replied. Not until now. I clicked compose and typed 4 words. Watchdog still on standby. I hit send. No emotion, no drama, just fact. I minimized the window and closed the terminal. The script would run in the background, invisible to every tool Arcavia currently used. Alex's team had migrated the stack. Sure, but they hadn't rewritten the core logic. They didn't know which wires still hummed beneath their polished dashboard. They never checked under the floorboards. I got up and walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and let the silence settle. It wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the kind that comes before a storm you've been preparing for, one you don't have to stop. Just survive. By 9:48 in the evening, the city outside had gone dark, except for traffic lights and the flicker of apartment windows. I stood at the edge of mine, looking down at the offices still lit in Arcavia's tower across the river. It was strange. For 7 years, that building had felt like a second home. Now it just looked like a hollow frame of glass and steel. No weight, no memory. They thought the silence would erase me, but they forgot I had built the part of the system that never sleeps. By 7:23 in the morning, I was standing in front of Arcavia Tower for what I thought would be the last time. I didn't bring a bag, just a scarf, my access badge, and a silver USB drive tucked inside the pocket of my coat. The sidewalk outside was busy with morning rush, faces lit by screens and caffeine. No one noticed me step into the building, no different than I had hundreds of times before. Only this time, I wasn't coming to solve a crisis. I was coming to leave. The lobby was warmer than I remembered. The polished floor reflected too much light, and the walls had new branding panels, agility, trust, innovation. I almost laughed. The security guard at the front desk was new. He didn't even look up as I tapped my badge. It still worked. That told me they hadn't revoked my physical access yet, just the digital parts they thought mattered. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. The security division. The doors opened to a hallway I once called home. Everything looked exactly the same. The same brittle fern dying in the corner. The same smudged glass wall by the whiteboard. Even the bulletin board still had my post-it note from last quarter's security audit. People are the first firewall, don't forget. No one looked up as I walked through the corridor. A few glanced, quickly turned away. Some didn't even notice. I was already a ghost. Leah came out of conference room 2 just as I passed. She stopped. We locked eyes. She didn't smile, neither did I, but she gave the faintest nod. Not approval, not apology, just recognition. I moved on. At my desk. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. Mousepad slightly askew. Notepad flipped open to half-written notes about threat modeling. My black mug with the chipped handle still sat by the monitor. Cold coffee frozen in a single brown ring. I sat for a moment. Not long. Then I pulled the silver USB from my coat pocket and placed it gently on the keyboard. It didn't look like much, but it held everything. Encrypted logs, cross-referenced timestamps, behavioral anomalies, and one auto-executing script, not malicious, just loud. If plugged into any Arcavia machine, it would open a clean, visual audit trail, no explanation, no edits, just the facts. I didn't leave a note. Anyone who found it would either understand or ignore it, and both outcomes worked in my favor. As I turned to leave, I heard fingers tapping rapidly on a keyboard down the hall. I glanced toward the open tech bay. Jonas! He didn't see me. He was hunched over Terminal 6, typing fast, switching between windows. A second monitor showed the infrastructure permissions dashboard. It looked like he was setting up a root key migration. I stepped closer. Unnoticed, he was rerouting admin privileges again, this time using a mirrored account system. A messy move if you didn't audit thoroughly. His hand hovered over the push leave command. He hesitated, toggled back to a diagnostic window, probably to verify response time. He forgot something. I saw it in the bottom corner of the screen, small, almost invisible. Internal triggers, not cleared. That meant any action he pushed, any escalation of privilege, would be mirrored into the legacy monitoring layer, the one no one had checked since migration, the one I still had access to. I smiled. It wasn't a vengeful smile. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was the smile of someone watching a chess move fall into place, not because she forced it, but because the opponent never saw the trap beneath his own strategy. I turned away, walked back down the hall. As I passed the break room, a junior engineer named Kalani looked up and gave me a small wave. She didn't know. None of them did. They were still running on the assumption that the system was watching out for them, that someone, somewhere, was still guarding the gate. Maybe that used to be me. Maybe it still was. The elevator opened silently. I stepped inside, pressed the ground floor, and exhaled. No anger, no panic, just control. As the doors closed, I thought one last time about the USB. It would sit there, untouched, until someone curious or brave plugged it in, or until the right mistake triggered its presence. Either way, it was no longer my responsibility to be loud. The code would speak for itself. At 7:01 in the morning, the system blinked. Then it went still. Claire's account, C. Kendrick, primary, was deactivated by a line of script pushed from the CTO's master override protocol. No alert, no confirmation screen. Just a silent execution command sent from Terminal 9, under admin clearance, inside the mainframe. A signal pulsed once, then split into 3 paths. The watchdog had awakened, on the 22nd floor. Jonas sipped burnt coffee, half reading a DevOps audit sheet while the infrastructure console pulsed green. He'd just finished pushing live the mirrored permission set he coded overnight, migrating root-level access from legacy users to the Jonas Tech control schema. The first blink happened on dashboard 6. Client reporting lagged by exactly 4 seconds. He didn't notice. By 7:02, the firewall validation node started to loop. That triggered the watchdog's Tier 1 protocol. The system began quietly withdrawing command layer privileges from all terminals not running verified legacy tokens. Access levels above Tier 4 were now read-only. Passwords began resetting silently in the background, randomized strings generated by the watchdog's logic core. Back on the 4th floor, Kalani, junior engineer, looked up from her screen and blinked. "Hey! Is the dev dashboard acting weird for you too?" she asked aloud. No one responded. By 7:03, the revenue reconciliation node failed to respond to 2 consecutive internal pings. That triggered Tier 2. Dashboards started going dark, first financial, then security. The error message was simple. Root mismatch. Please contact system administrator. In the boardroom on the 19th floor, a breakfast meeting was underway. CEO Carla Mendel sat at the head of the table, watching a slide on quarterly growth figures. Alex Brain stood near the screen, confident as ever, clicking through bullet points about efficiency, streamlined security, and modernization. Then Valeria, Carla's assistant, stepped into the room. She didn't knock. She looked pale. "Carla, you just got an alert on your private inbox." Carla raised an eyebrow. "What kind of alert?" Valeria handed her a printed page. She'd already run it down from the secure printer in legal. Carla read it once, then again, slower. Credential mismatch. Emergency lockdown initiated by legacy script. Trigger time, 7:01 in the morning. Subject, C. Kendrick. Primary, revoked. Location, Arcavia Global Core. She looked at Alex. He said nothing. By 7:04, chaos began to ripple across the building. Internal emails bounced. Terminals auto-locked. 2 compliance analysts got kicked out of their audit shells mid-query. 3 account managers in the sales division were locked out of client files. One even shouted from behind the glass wall, I can't access the contract vault. Everything's grayed out. Kalani stood up and walked to Leah's desk. Hey, something's wrong with the endpoint monitor. My admin role just downgraded mid-session. Leah clicked rapidly at her own station. Mine too. And the logs. They're scrambled. Jonas, 3 floors up, finally noticed the pattern. He clicked into the monitoring panel and froze. All his permissions, revoked. Even his override tool was locked. A single blinking message sat on his screen. System integrity violation. Escalation disabled. He ran to a backup terminal. But the Watchdog's Tier 3 had already isolated all non-verified subnets. Jonas Tech's control path was gone. Alex's phone buzzed. 1 notification, then 10 more. He didn't look at Carla, didn't say a word. By 7:06, the Watchdog executed Tier 4. A burst of compressed code shot to a secure external node, Echo Root, outside of Arcavia's control. From there, a summary audit was generated and sent to the inbox of Carla Mendel under the subject line, Containment triggered, audit attached, unauthorized clearance migration detected. The report wasn't long. It was clean, time-stamped, signed with Claire's original developer key. Carla stood up. Everyone in the room fell silent. She looked at Alex. Voice low. You hid the breach. Then you fired the only person who stopped it. Alex opened his mouth, but no words came. Outside the boardroom, red banners began appearing on hallway monitors. Access temporarily disabled. Please wait for system revalidation. By 7:07, the entire building entered silent lockdown. No sirens, no alarms, just one phrase echoing silently in every connected system. Watchdog protocol. Complete. By 7:42 in the morning, I was seated by the window at Lindstrom Cafe, 2 blocks east, across the river from Arcavia Tower. The place smelled like dark roast and cinnamon, with a hint of rain clinging to the air. Outside, the city buzzed in its usual rhythm, but just across the bridge, Arcavia's glass fortress pulsed like a wounded machine. From here, it looked like any other office tower, but I could see the difference now. Inside, people moved quickly, not with purpose, with panic. I sipped slowly from a ceramic mug, black coffee, no sugar, and leaned back, my coat draped neatly on the chair behind me, scarf folded beside my laptop. The silver USB was gone. Of course! Left exactly where it needed to be. The barista, Elena, glanced at me from behind the counter. You used to work over there, right? She asked, nodding toward the tower. I did. Something's going on. Phones have been ringing nonstop since 7. She pointed at the small TV hanging in the corner. The local news ticker rolled across the bottom of the screen. Breaking Arcavia systems, hit by internal lockdown, trading platform suspended, estimated losses climbed to 71 million. I didn't blink. Another headline flashed across the screen. Sources say internal audit triggered by legacy protocol breach. A shaky video clip played briefly. Dozens of people filing out of Arcavia's lobby, some on phones, others just staring at their frozen tablets. Jonas appeared for a split second in the background, arguing with a uniformed technician. Across the window, I saw Kalani near the front steps. She stood still, holding her badge in one hand and staring at the turnstile that no longer lit green. Elena turned the volume up. A reporter's voice crackled through the static. Internal watchdog protocol triggered at exactly 7:01 this morning. According to confidential sources, the identity of the original developer remains unconfirmed. I smiled behind the rim of my cup. Let it remain unconfirmed. Let them guess. I opened my laptop. Not for work, just to observe. My private dashboard loaded quickly. Clean connection. Echo Root was stable. The audit logs already backed up in 2 continents. They couldn't stop it now. The truth was already moving faster than they were. A ping interrupted my thoughts. Message from Mara. Clean signal. Well done. Quiet as ever. Another notification buzzed, this time from a public platform. Mason Grant, CEO of Grantwell Capital, Arcavia's largest institutional client, had just posted a single-line status on his verified account. Only person I trust now is Claire. Without her. We're out. Elena gasped softly. Wait, Claire? That's you? I looked up at her. Her eyes were wide. I nodded once. She didn't say anything more. She just poured another cup of coffee and placed it on the counter beside mine. No charge, she said. By 7:53 in the morning, Carla Mendel stepped outside the Arcavia lobby. I could see her through the window, stern, unreadable. She made no statement, no press. But the way her team clustered around her said everything. She was furious, not at the collapse, at the silence that caused it. The collapse didn't scream. It didn't break glass or trip alarms. It whispered. It asked, "Why didn't you listen when it was quiet?" Behind Carla, Alex wasn't visible. I wondered if he was still upstairs, scrambling, writing apologies, or deleting things too late. The cafe stayed quiet around me. Elena returned to polishing glasses. A man at the far table typed with one hand while holding his phone in the other. Life went on, just like always, except now. I was outside the noise. I looked back once more at the tower, not with resentment, not with triumph, with clarity. I didn't break them. I just stopped holding them together. It was 9:04 in the morning when the official statement went out. Effective immediately. Alex Brain has resigned from his position as Chief Technology Officer of Arcavia Systems. Internal review ongoing. Transition support will be provided. It was clipped. Professional. Cold. But everyone understood. Behind closed doors. The board had finally reviewed the chain of failures. Jonas's ghost signatures. The suspicious log modifications. The quiet rerouting of internal alerts. And of course, Claire Kendrick's name. Threaded through every early detection layer still intact by 10:06 in the morning. Jonas Tech's office space had been cleared. Jonas himself was unreachable. His company's homepage returned a 404 error by lunch, inside the Arcavia Tower. Silence lingered like smoke after a fire. Leah didn't come in that day, but her message arrived mid-morning. "Claire, I'm sorry. I should have said something. I froze, but I read the full log. You were right." Claire sat at her desk by the window at home, the city glowing beneath clouds. Her inbox was flooded. External offers, internal apologies. One quiet inquiry from Carla's executive office asking if she would consider consulting during the restoration process. She didn't answer right away. She just clicked into the archived folder labeled Silver Drive Backup. Inside, one document. No executable files, no malware, no override commands, just a clean PDF. Title: Incident Report 3:01 in the morning, breach containment, prepared by Claire Kendrick. Attached full log chain. Unedited, the exact same report she had sent weeks ago. The one that got filtered, buried, ignored. That's what had been on the USB. No tricks, no revenge code, no destruction plan, just the truth. And when someone finally read it, really read it, everything else unraveled by itself. Claire stood and stretched. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel smug. What she felt was harder to name, an earned quietness, like setting something down after carrying it longer than she meant to. A message pinged, this time from Mara. Echo root logs have been archived. Your access will remain in place, but maybe you won't need it anymore. Claire smiled, not at the screen, at the idea. She closed the laptop and reached for her coat. Outside, the world was still moving. Cafes were open, trains on time, emails pinging in offices she didn't need to return to. but something had shifted. Not out there, in her. She picked up her notebook from the table, flipped to the last page, wrote 2 lines in tight handwriting. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped protecting them. She closed the book and stepped out the door. And sometimes, justice doesn't look like fire. It looks like walking away, while everything behind you collapses under the weight of its own lies. If you've ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or silenced for doing the right thing, know this: your silence doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous. And your truth, it waits, just like Claire's did. If this story resonated with you, leave us a comment below. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their quiet strength. And don't forget to subscribe, because there's always another story, another reckoning, and another Claire waiting